For 6 years, Clara Whitmore had believed she would die alone on her failing Nebraska ranch. Then, on a hot evening in the summer of 1881, a wounded stranger rode through her gate carrying a letter written by her dead husband 10 years earlier. Clara stood frozen on the porch of the small farmhouse. Beside her, 12-year-old Emily held tightly to the sleeve of her mother's faded green dress. The rider stopped beneath the red evening sky. Dust covered his black coat, his hat, and the tired gray horse beneath him. His left shoulder hung lower than the other, and one leg rested stiffly in the stirrup. Every movement seemed to cause him pain. But Clara was not frightened by the revolver at his hip or the deep scar running across his face. She was frightened by the yellow envelope in his hand. Her name was written across the front in strong, slanted letters. Clara Whitmore. She knew that handwriting. It belonged to Thomas. It belonged to the husband she had buried beneath a cottonwood tree 6 winters earlier. The stranger slowly removed his hat. "Mrs. Whitmore?" he asked. Clara could not answer at first. Her chest felt tight, and the warm prairie air suddenly seemed too heavy to breathe. "I am Clara Whitmore," she finally said. The man climbed down from his horse with great care. When his boots touched the ground, he nearly fell. He caught the saddle and stood still until the pain passed. "My name is Nathan Cole," he said. "I served with Thomas during the war. Years later, I traveled with him on the western freight roads." Emily moved closer to Clara. Clara stared at the envelope in his hand. On the back, Thomas had written a date. 10 years earlier. It was 3 years before Thomas returned home for good. It was 4 years before the fever took him from Clara and Emily. "Why do you have my husband's letter?" Clara asked. Her voice had become cold and guarded. Nathan lowered his eyes. "Because I gave him my word." He walked toward the porch and held out the envelope. "He told me to bring it to you if I ever learned he was dead." Clara did not reach for it. For 6 long years, she had raised Emily alone on a dry piece of land outside the town of Red Hollow. She had survived storms that tore boards from the barn. She had fought grasshoppers that destroyed an entire field of corn. She had carried water from the creek when the well turned muddy. The previous winter had nearly broken her. Emily had worn 2 old shirts beneath her dress because Clara could not afford a proper coat. They had burned broken furniture when the firewood ran out. Clara had eaten only 1 meal a day so her daughter would have enough. 3 months earlier, the bank had offered to buy the ranch for almost nothing. Clara had stood at the gate with the deed in her hand. She had nearly accepted. Now a stranger stood before her, carrying the voice of the man she had loved. Thomas had been gone for 6 years, but Clara still kept his boots beneath the kitchen bench. Emily polished them every year on his birthday. Sometimes Clara still placed 3 plates on the table without thinking. She would stare at the empty place for several seconds before quietly putting the extra plate away. Emily had once asked if her father could see them from heaven. Clara had smiled and told her that he watched every sunrise over the ranch. But late at night, when Emily was asleep, Clara often wondered whether Thomas could see how badly she was failing. She wondered whether he knew she was losing the home they had built together. Nathan took another step forward. "I should have arrived years ago," he said, "but my life took a dark road. I spent too long running from things I could not forgive." Clara looked at his tired face. There was no pride in his eyes, only shame and regret. She finally accepted the letter. Her fingers shook as she touched it. The envelope had been wrapped in oilcloth and kept inside an old leather Bible. The paper was worn, but the seal had never been broken. For one painful moment, Clara imagined she could smell Thomas again. She remembered the tobacco leaves he carried in his pocket and the pine soap he used on Sundays. Her knees weakened. She lowered herself into the rocking chair. "Who are you really?" she whispered. Nathan looked directly into her eyes. "I am a man who owes your husband his life." Then he looked toward Emily, and something changed in his face. "And I am a coward who carried this letter for 10 years because I was ashamed to face his family." Clara pressed the envelope against her chest. The wind moved through the dry grass beyond the house. For 6 years, she had believed the past was buried beside Thomas beneath the cottonwood tree. Now the past had ridden straight to her porch. "Why now?" she asked. "Why did it take 10 years?" Nathan looked down at his scarred hands. "Thomas never asked me to deliver it while he was alive." Clara frowned. Nathan continued. "In 1871, Thomas and I worked a freight trail outside Independence, Missouri. He took the job because he needed money for cattle, seed, and repairs. Before we parted, he gave me that envelope." Nathan nodded toward the letter. "He said there was something inside he had never found the courage to tell you. He ordered me not to open it. He said I must only bring it to you if I learned he was gone." Clara's grip tightened around the paper. "I believed Thomas had returned home safely," Nathan said. "For years, I pictured him here with you." "What happened to you?" Emily asked softly. Nathan looked at the child. "I was accused of killing a man during a fight in Missouri. I was innocent, but no one believed me. I spent 5 years in prison before another man confessed." Clara studied him carefully. "When I was released, I worked in Colorado mines," Nathan continued. "I saved enough money to buy a horse. Then I began searching for Thomas. I asked about him in every town between Denver and Red Hollow." His jaw tightened. "Yesterday, I learned that he died 6 years ago." Nathan turned his face away. "I kept my promise exactly as he asked, but I still arrived 6 years too late." A tear moved down Clara's cheek. The man before her looked like someone who had been carrying a weight far heavier than the road behind him. "You have traveled a long way, Nathan Cole," Clara said. She stood slowly. "There is stew on the stove. Tie your horse near the barn." Nathan looked surprised. "I do not want to trouble you, ma'am." "You brought my husband's last words home," Clara replied. "You will eat at my table." They entered the house as darkness spread across the prairie. The kitchen smelled of wood smoke, onions, and dried herbs. Emily sat across from Nathan and watched him with curious eyes. Clara placed the letter beside her plate. She was not ready to open it. Not yet. For a little while, she wanted to believe Thomas was sitting with them again. "Tell us about him," Clara said. "Tell Emily what her father was like before he came home." Nathan stared into the candle flame. "Thomas Whitmore was the bravest man I ever knew," he said. "During the war, when every man around us was afraid, Thomas talked about this ranch. He talked about a beautiful woman in a green dress who waited for him." Clara smiled through her tears. "He said he would build a safe home for you," Nathan continued. "He said the Nebraska wind would carry your name across the fields." Emily leaned forward. "Did he ever save your life?" Nathan looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," he said. "Your father saved my life when no one else would turn back." Clara looked toward the unopened letter. "What did Thomas write?" Emily whispered. Clara touched the old envelope. Outside, thunder rolled across the distant hills. A storm was coming. With trembling hands, Clara reached for a small kitchen knife and placed its edge beneath the seal. She had waited 6 years to hear her husband's voice again. But she did not yet know that the words inside that letter would reveal a secret buried beneath their own land, a secret powerful enough to save the ranch and change the stranger's life forever. Clara slid the knife beneath the old seal. The paper inside made a dry sound as she unfolded it. Her hands shook so badly that Nathan reached across the table to steady the candle. Emily moved closer to her mother. Clara took a slow breath and began to read. "My dearest Clara, I am riding beside a freight camp west of Independence. Nathan is sleeping near the fire, and tomorrow we will take different roads. I should be thinking about the journey ahead, but all I can see is you standing beneath the kitchen doorway in your green dress." Clara stopped. A soft cry escaped her lips. She remembered the dress. It had been the first one Thomas bought after they were married. The cloth had faded long ago, but she had kept it folded inside a wooden chest. "What else does it say?" Emily asked. Clara wiped her eyes and continued. "I know the ranch has asked more from you than I ever wanted. I know the roof still leaks above the back room. I know the well turns brown after heavy rain. I know you pretend not to be tired when I return home. Clara lowered the page. Thomas had noticed everything. She had always believed he had been too busy carrying his own worries to see hers. Nathan watched quietly from across the table. Clara read again. There is something I never told you. Before I left for this freight job, I buried an iron box near the North Field. My father brought what is inside from California many years ago. I saved it because I feared one bad season might destroy everything we built. Emily's eyes widened. Clara felt her heart begin to pound. The box lies beneath the old split cottonwood beside Willow Creek. Stand where the trunk divides. Walk 14 steps toward the setting sun. Dig beneath the flat white stone. The box is 3 feet below the ground. Clara stared at the words. The old cottonwood still stood beside the creek. She and Thomas had often rested beneath it during hot summer days. I hid it because I wanted you to have one last road out, Clara continued reading. Use it if the crops fail. Use it if Emily needs a coat, a doctor, or a good school. Use it if the bank comes for the land. Do not keep it buried because it once belonged to me. A life spent only surviving is not the life I wanted for you. Clara could no longer see the page clearly. Tears covered her eyes. Emily wrapped both arms around her. Clara held her daughter and cried harder than she had cried at Thomas's grave. For years, she had believed she had failed him. She had thought every broken fence and empty food shelf proved she was not strong enough. But Thomas had known how hard the ranch could become. He had prepared for it. The help had been beneath their land the entire time. Nathan stood. I will get a shovel. The rain had not yet reached the ranch, but lightning flashed beyond the hills. The wind moved through the grass in strong waves. Clara folded the letter carefully and placed it inside her apron. Then she took the lantern from the wall. The three of them walked toward Willow Creek. Nathan carried the shovel over one shoulder. His injured leg dragged slightly behind him, but he did not complain. The old cottonwood appeared beneath the dark sky. Its trunk had split years ago, creating 2 great arms that reached toward the clouds. Clara stood where Thomas had written. 14 steps toward the setting sun, she said. Nathan counted carefully. 1, 2, 3. Emily followed with the lantern. At the 14th step, they found a flat white stone half buried beneath the grass. Nathan pushed the shovel into the hard ground. The earth was dry and packed tightly from the summer heat. Each movement made his face tighten with pain. You should rest, Clara said. I have rested too many years, Nathan replied. Tonight I finish what Thomas asked me to do. He kept digging. Thunder rolled closer. After several minutes, the first drops of rain fell. Emily held the lantern beneath her coat to protect the flame. Nathan dug deeper. Then the shovel struck something solid. The sound was dull and heavy. Nathan dropped to his knees and cleared the soil with his hands. A rusted iron box appeared beneath the roots. Clara covered her mouth. It was real. Nathan lifted the box from the ground. It was smaller than Clara expected, but its weight made his arms strain. The box had been wrapped in dark oilcloth and sealed with hard pine pitch. They carried it back to the house as the rain began to fall harder. Inside the kitchen, Nathan placed it on the table. Emily stood close beside Clara. Nathan used the edge of the shovel to break the old lock. The lid opened with a sharp crack. Inside was another layer of waxed cloth. Nathan pulled it aside. Rows of gold coins filled the box. Several small gold nuggets rested beside them. The candle light danced across the metal. Clara did not speak. There was enough money to repair the barn, replace the roof, buy cattle, and pay every debt. There was enough to send Emily to a proper school. There was enough to keep the ranch for the rest of Clara's life. Emily looked at Nathan. You carried the letter for 10 years, she said. You could have opened it. Nathan shook his head. It did not belong to me. You could have taken the gold, Clara said. I did not know it existed. But once you read the directions tonight, you knew where it was. Nathan met her eyes. Thomas trusted me with his last secret. I have lost many things in my life, Mrs. Whitmore. I was not going to lose the last piece of honor I had left. Clara studied his worn face. For the first time, she saw more than a stranger. She saw a man who had been punished for years, yet had carried another man's promise across half the country. You are an honest man, Nathan Cole. Nathan looked down. I am trying to become one. The storm continued through the night. Nathan slept in the barn because he refused Clara's offer of the spare room. By morning, part of the north fence had fallen. Nathan repaired it before breakfast. Clara told him he did not need to work. He answered that his horse needed rest and that he could not sit while there was work to be done. 1 day became 3. 3 days became 2 weeks. Nathan repaired the leaking roof and strengthened the barn doors. He dug mud from the well and cleaned the old water pump. He replaced the broken steps outside the porch. Clara paid the bank and bought enough grain for winter. She placed most of the gold in a secure bank in the town of Cedar Ridge. She kept only what was needed for repairs. Nathan never asked for a single coin. Emily began following him around the ranch. At first, she watched from a distance. Then one morning, she brought him Thomas's old hammer. Papa said this hammer never lied, she told him. Nathan turned it carefully in his hand. Then we should only use it for honest work. Together, they repaired the gate beside the creek. Nathan showed Emily how to measure boards and how to drive a nail without bending it. He taught her how to read hoof marks in soft ground and how to whistle for the old mare. Clara often watched them from the kitchen window. She had almost forgotten how a child's laughter could fill a home. One evening, Nathan returned from Cedar Ridge carrying a wrapped bundle. Inside was a thick brown winter coat for Emily. The girl stared at it. This is too fine, Clara said. Nathan shook his head. No child should face another Nebraska winter wearing old shirts beneath her dress. Emily threw her arms around him. Nathan stood stiffly at first. Then he gently placed one hand on her back. Clara saw tears in his eyes before he turned away. As summer faded, people in Cedar Ridge began to talk. A widow living with a strange man gave them enough gossip for every porch in town. Mrs. Crawford, the bank manager's wife, visited Clara one afternoon. It does not look proper, she said. A man sleeping in your barn and eating at your table. Clara stood tall on the porch. Nathan was my husband's closest friend. That may be true, but people are speaking. People did not speak when the bank tried to take my land, Clara replied. They did not speak when my daughter had no winter coat. Nathan has treated us with respect from the moment he arrived. Mrs. Crawford lifted her chin. A woman alone must protect her name. Clara looked toward the barn, where Nathan was teaching Emily how to repair a saddle strap. My name is not protected by cruel whispers. It is protected by the truth. Mrs. Crawford left without another word. That night, Nathan sat alone on the porch. Clara joined him. The air was cold, and the stars were bright above the fields. I should leave soon, he said. Clara felt a sudden ache in her chest. Why? Because the town is talking. I will not repay your kindness by damaging your name. You have done nothing wrong. That does not stop people from believing the worst. Clara sat beside him. The ranch is safe now, Nathan continued. You have the gold, you do not need me. Clara looked toward the dark barn, the repaired fences, and the new boards above Emily's room. The gold saved the land, she said. You saved something else. Nathan turned toward her. Before Clara could explain, the front door opened. Emily stood there wrapped in a blanket. You cannot leave, she said. Nathan rose slowly. Emily, this is not your burden. You do not have to replace Papa, she said. No one can. Nathan lowered his eyes. But you can still stay. Emily returned inside. Clara looked at Nathan. His face had gone pale. I do not know how to stay, he whispered. Clara moved closer. Then learned. Nathan stared at her as if those two words frightened him more than prison, war, or any road he had ever traveled. Then a horse cried out from the darkness. A second later, a rifle shot struck the porch post beside Clara's head. Nathan pulled her to the ground. Another shot shattered the kitchen window. From beyond the gate, a man shouted through the night. Nathan Cole, you should have kept riding. Nathan's face changed. The gentle man who had repaired the roof disappeared. In his place stood someone Clara had never seen before. Someone who knew exactly who was waiting in the darkness. Nathan drew his revolver. My past has found me, he said. Nathan pushed Clara behind the porch wall as another rifle shot cut through the darkness. Take Emily to the cellar, he ordered. Clara grabbed his arm. You are not facing them alone. I brought this danger here. And this is my home, Clara said. No one fights for it without me. Nathan looked into her eyes. There was fear in them, but there was also the same strength that had carried her through 6 lonely years. A man laughed near the gate. You always were stubborn, Cole. Nathan recognized the voice. Silas Boone, he called. The shooting stopped. A tall man stepped from behind the fence. 2 armed riders moved beside him. Silas wore a long gray coat and a black hat pulled low over his face. Nathan had known him in prison. Silas had been the man who arranged the false witnesses against him. He had wanted Nathan blamed for the killing because Nathan had seen him rob a government supply wagon. Years later, another prisoner confessed the truth, but Silas escaped before the law could arrest him. You should have stayed in Colorado, Silas said. You should have stayed hidden, Nathan replied. Silas smiled. I heard you found a widow with a box of gold. Clara's stomach tightened. Mrs. Crawford had seen Clara leave the bank after depositing the coins. Someone in town must have talked. The gold is not here, Clara shouted. I do not believe you. Silas raised his rifle. Nathan fired first. The bullet struck the fence near Silas and forced him back into the shadows. Cellar, Nathan told Clara, now. This time she obeyed. Clara rushed inside and found Emily near the broken kitchen window. The girl held Thomas's old revolver with both hands. Put that down, Clara said. I can help. You help by staying alive. Clara took the weapon and led Emily through the small door beneath the stairs. Before entering the cellar, Clara looked back toward the porch. Nathan stood alone behind a wooden post while shots struck the house around him. Clara could not leave him. She pushed Emily into the cellar. Lock this door. Mama, no. Do as I say. Clara closed the door and returned to the kitchen. She moved beneath the windows and reached the back entrance. From there, she could see the barn. One of Silas's men was moving around the house. Clara waited until he stepped near the water barrel. Then she raised Thomas's revolver. Drop your gun. The man turned. Clara fired into the dirt beside his boot. He froze. I will not miss twice, she said. He slowly dropped his weapon. Nathan appeared from the side of the house and struck the man across the jaw. The attacker fell beside the barrel. You should be in the cellar, Nathan said. You should stop giving orders no one follows. Even in the darkness, Clara saw the smallest smile on his face. Then Silas shouted from the gate. You cannot protect them forever, Cole. Nathan's smile disappeared. Silas fired again. The bullet struck Nathan in the side. He fell against the barn wall. Clara screamed his name. Nathan pressed one hand against the wound. I am all right. Blood moved between his fingers. Silas walked toward them. His last rider followed several steps behind. Clara raised the revolver, but Silas pointed his rifle at Nathan. Drop it, widow. Clara did not move. Drop it or he dies. Nathan looked at her. Do not give him the ranch." "This is not about the ranch," Clara whispered. She lowered the revolver. Silas smiled. The sound of a horse came from the road. Then another's. Lanterns appeared beyond the gate. Sheriff Walter Briggs rode onto the ranch with 4 armed townsmen behind him. Silas turned toward the road. Nathan used the moment to grab Clara and pull her behind the barn wall. The sheriff fired into the air. "Put down your weapons." Silas's remaining rider surrendered at once. Silas ran toward his horse, but Emily stepped from behind the porch. She held Nathan's rifle against her shoulder. "Do not move," she said. Clara's heart stopped. Silas looked at the young girl and laughed. "You will not shoot me." Emily's hands shook. "No," she said, "but Sheriff Briggs will." Silas turned. The sheriff stood only a few yards away, with his revolver aimed directly at him. Silas slowly raised his hands. The danger ended as suddenly as it had begun. The sheriff tied Silas and his men beside the fence. Mrs. Crawford's husband had come to him earlier that evening. He had heard strangers asking questions about Clara's gold and Nathan's past. The banker had finally decided to do the right thing. Clara hardly heard the explanation. She was kneeling beside Nathan. His face had turned white. "The bullet passed through," Sheriff Briggs said after looking at the wound. "He has lost blood, but he may live." "May?" Clara asked. Nathan reached for her hand. "I told you trouble would not be faced alone." Clara pressed his hand against her cheek. "You are not allowed to leave me now." They carried Nathan into the house and placed him in Clara's bed. For 3 days, fever burned through him. Clara remained beside him through every hour. She cleaned his wound, changed the cloths on his forehead, and forced water between his lips. Emily slept in a chair near the door. On the 3rd night, Nathan opened his eyes. He looked around the room. "Am I dead?" Clara began to cry. "No." Nathan looked at her tired face. "You stayed. Where else would I go?" He lifted his hand and touched her cheek. "I spent half my life believing I did not deserve a home." Clara leaned closer. "A home is not something a man deserves. It is something people build together." Nathan's eyes filled with tears. "I love you, Clara." She closed her eyes. She had been afraid to hear those words. She had believed loving another man would betray Thomas. But Thomas's letter had told her not to spend her life only surviving. Clara kissed Nathan's hand. "I love you too." Nathan recovered slowly. The town changed after the attack. People who had whispered about him now brought food and supplies to the ranch. Sheriff Briggs cleared Nathan's name publicly and sent Silas back to Missouri to face trial. The banker returned the unfair fees he had charged Clara during her hardest years. Mrs. Crawford arrived with a pie and an embarrassed face. "I judged you unfairly," she said. Clara accepted the apology, but did not forget how easily kindness had come only after danger passed. By the time the first frost covered the fields, Nathan could walk without help. One Sunday morning, he took Clara and Emily to the old cottonwood beside Willow Creek. He carried no expensive ring. In his hand was a small wooden bird he had carved during his recovery. "I cannot give you a perfect past," he told Clara. "I cannot promise there will never be another hard season." He looked at Emily. "But I can promise that neither of you will ever face one alone." Emily took Nathan's hand and placed it in her mother's. "You cannot replace Papa," she said. Nathan nodded. "I would never try. But you can be part of our family." Clara smiled through her tears. "Stay, Nathan," she whispered, "not as a guest." They married 2 weeks later in the small church at Cedar Ridge. Clara wore a green dress like the one Thomas had remembered in his letter. Emily carried wildflowers from Willow Creek. When the preacher asked who gave Clara away, Emily stood from the front pew. "No one gives her away," she said. "Mr. Cole is joining us." the church filled with gentle laughter. Nathan looked at Clara as if she were the home he had searched for all his life. The years that followed still brought storms, failed crops, and difficult winters. But Clara never again sat alone at the table with an empty chair across from her. Emily became a teacher and later married a young doctor. She raised 3 children who spent every summer running through the fields of the Whitmore ranch. Clara kept Thomas's letter above the fireplace for the rest of her life. It reminded her that loving the past did not mean she had to remain trapped inside it. Many years later, Nathan and Clara sat together on the porch. Their hair had turned gray, and their hands had become thin with age. The evening sun covered the fields in golden light. "Did you ever regret staying?" Clara asked. Nathan looked toward the road where he had first arrived with the letter. "I once thought freedom meant never belonging anywhere," he said. He tightened his hand around hers. "Then I found you." The wind moved softly through the tall grass. For one peaceful moment, Clara imagined it carried Thomas's blessing across the land. A letter written 10 years earlier had saved the ranch. But the stranger who delivered it had saved her from dying alone.